All right, so that's in progress. Let's see. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, here we are. So welcome to the workshop, and just know that this will be available after if you want to watch the recording. So we should probably also just introduce ourselves officially. So my name is Erin Durham, and I am a reference instruction. I work specifically with some of the humanities folks, English, languages, intercultural communication, and then arts such as music, dance, and theater.
And I'm Drew Alfgren. I am one of the reference and instruction librarians. I do history, American studies, IS, Asian studies, ancient studies. So we pretty much between us cover a big portion of the humanities and some of the social sciences.
Yeah, and just so everyone's aware, this will really focus on literature reviews that you're working on for, say, a thesis or perhaps for a dissertation or for an undergraduate paper that needs a literature review. We're going to go into that type of literature review, an academic literature review. The one thing we will not be focused on today is a systematic review, which is its own, it has its own parameters. It's very specific. That's a huge process. So we're not going to talk about systematic reviews, just so everyone is on the same page. We're going to do an academic literature.
If you're an undergraduate, this can also be useful if you're doing an annotated bibliography or any other type of literature search where you're looking across, where you're doing a comprehensive search across the literature for your topic.
Yeah. All right. So maybe we can start with a kind of a definition or different descriptions of what a literature review does. Basically, a literature review is your opportunity to discuss arguments that other scholars have made or are making right now in the field. So it's a way to get a snapshot of what are the conversations happening in your area of study. In addition, a literature review is an opportunity for you to analyze and synthesize the scholarly discussion and debate. And what usually happens is you say, scholars, last name and last name, Smith and Smith, argue such and such. And then you might also bring in counter arguments, right? You're trying to show that there is a debate happening or a discussion happening about a certain topic in the field. You also might want to show how maybe the discussion has changed over time. This can be useful in certain disciplines if you're looking at, say, a certain analysis. If you're looking at an interpretation of a text, say you're doing an English review and you're looking at ways a certain text has been interpreted through the decades, you might mention different interpretations that way. If you're doing a social science paper, kind of looking at maybe a study of mental health, you might look at how different interventions have changed over time, how scholars have addressed an issue over time. And finally, you want to identify gaps in the research. And this can be useful to see what populations have been studied, what are some research questions that maybe haven't been fully answered. And if you're doing a dissertation or a thesis, this can be really useful to identify these gaps, because then you can plug yourself in by offering additional research that maybe hasn't been covered as much, if that makes sense.
It also shows to your committee and your advisor that you've done your homework. You know the methodologies. You know what might have been really popular 50 years ago and then got reconsidered 30 years ago. So it's a way to say, yes, I know what I'm talking about, and this is where I'm going to be working from. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really just shows that it shows to your committee, it shows your faculty that you're working with, how yours is relevant. It might address a specific gap in the research, or it might show how you're applying it to a different population group or a different text. You're using one type of analysis or one methodology, and you're using it for your particular specific research focus. All right.
Oh, and please, I guess we should say, if you have any questions along the way, please put them in chat or just raise your hand or whatever you do, and we're happy to have interruptions, so.
Yeah, please. We, in the past for COVID, when we could gather in large groups pretty easily, we would be in person with you all. So we could kind of, it was a better flow. We could kind of see who had a question. You could just talk.
It's a conversation.
So now it's a little more,
Yeah.
we have the online version. So feel free to put something in the chat at any point. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the steps for writing a literature review. These are just general steps. We'll go into more depth a little bit later on. But it's nice to kind of see an outline, and these might be very obvious if you've done writing before, but it's really helpful to have a research question and also a research topic to start out. This is likely to be refined later on too. As you're reading the literature, this may slightly change, and that is normal. That's part of the process of doing research. You want to gather your sources, look on the library databases, do your search. And then from there, I always find this to be a really important step. When you're reading through, you're taking notes and you're trying to organize and group by different themes, or you're trying to identify the methodology being used, what authors are arguing in these different sources, right? So you're trying to really parse out how are these academics, how is their paper different from the others? How can you differentiate them? And what themes are really being presented? So when you write your review, you can come from having your sources very organized. You can know what authors are arguing what things, and then you can synthesize your review as you're going along. So I just want to pose a question. We'll look at a few examples, and as we look at the examples, if you can think about this question, how is writing a literature review similar to having a conversation? So let's look at a few examples. We'll come back to the question if anyone wants to share in the chat any of your thoughts. Let's take a look. So here's two different examples. I'm going to start with an article. I think this is from the psychology literature. Okay, so this is from the Journal of Human Behavior in the Social Environment. So it's looking at family, academic, and psychological outcomes of language brokering. So it's also kind of a dual. It's like a linguistic paper as well. So kind of fun, interdisciplinary. So we're going to go through and take a look here. And let me know, Drew, if you're not seeing the article.
I am. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So hopefully everyone is seeing the article there. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And it can be helpful to see how other academics write a literature review. A literature review is standard in most academic papers. So usually it's in the beginning section. Sometimes there's a section called the literature review. Other times it's just kind of meshed in with the introduction. And in this case, it kind of looks like it's folding in right here. You can notice there's a lot of different citations in this section, author name, and date. And it's looking like they're defining language brokering and they're using other scholars' work to define it, right? You can see as they're going through, they're sharing what scholars have worked on this. They're talking about language acquisition and professional translators with this paper. They're talking about culture brokering using the paper from Jones and Trickett, right? So they're kind of going through and using what definitions have been shared with scholars, by scholars. Then in this case, this keeps going on and it continues. It kind of talks about different characteristics. And in this case, there's a lot of different citations they're using, right? They're pulling from a number of different papers. And it's a nice example because they're kind of synthesizing it. They're going through and they're describing these different aspects. They're defining kind of what they are. They're setting up their own research, right? They're talking about language brokering. They're talking about characteristics of language brokers, and they have all the different papers and scholars to back it up in their literature review. And then they get into their own research. But it's really important to see that usually sets the tone and it sets the context for the rest of the paper. Let's look at, so that was an example of an academic journal, an academic article. Let's go back and take a look at a dissertation. So those of you who are graduate students, who are maybe PhD students, I was on a language kick for this when I was putting the slides together. So this is another language dissertation. Sorry to other disciplines. We're going to zoom in just a little bit. That wasn't great. I wonder if I can expand it. Let me download this and see if I can. Nope.
Make it bigger. Yeah.
Oh,
And remember that article that Aaron brought up last is also a good example of what you can do as you're doing your research. You can publish articles along the way.
Yes.
So, you know, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but you should always be in communication with your advisor. You should be talking these things out as you go along, but then you can also say, hey, could I publish this in the journal, because it looks very much like the 5 articles I read last week. And believe me, you can get all sorts of things out of this as you go along. So
that's a great point, Drew. Yeah. So as you're in your graduate programs, as you're writing papers for your classes, work with your professors, look at journals, see if there's opportunities for you to submit your paper to other journals. There's also graduate journals that are available to publish in sometimes. So that's one of, and then obviously if you're a PhD student, you want to be publishing and looking for opportunities to publish in regular academic journals.
but even one of our students is doing doing research for ERCAD. That's a wonderful opportunity. And that can develop into all sorts of different things. So
Yes, that's a great point. Let's look at one example from a dissertation. This is a narrative inquiry of second language teacher agency and culturally responsive pedagogy. So it's like a language, second language learners. And this was an example I pulled because I liked how they laid it out. This is not always the case. In fact, usually you will not see it organized this nicely. Sometimes it's not even labeled literature review. As we saw in the other example, it was just part of the introduction. In a dissertation, it's typical to have like a full chapter or so, though, that gives you the literature. And in this case, you can kind of see how they have some of their search terms in these categories. They have a whole section on culturally responsive pedagogy. That's a whole part of the lit review. They have a whole section on critical reflection and all the subsections there. And then they have a section on teacher identity and agency. So these are all the different components that they're going to be talking about throughout their dissertation. That was only the literature review. Then they have their whole other dissertation, their methodology, their data analysis, their themes, etc. So let's actually go to this section. I think it was page 20 something. Let's just look at the actual text. Sorry for the scrolling. This is sorry to make anyone seasick. I apologize. So here is the literature review itself. And it's laid out where you can see they have a nice introduction. They're citing some of their scholars. And then what's nice is they have these different areas, right, and subcategories. So within critical theory, they cite these different scholars, Paulo Freire, Lecomte, right? And then they have their section on agency where they cite all the different scholars about agency. So they have these different buckets, these different categories where they're citing the literature on these different topics. Culturally responsive pedagogy. You have all the authors talking about that. You have this whole section of just scholars on culture and language and teaching. So if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed by all the articles you're reading, I recommend starting to group them in themes and identify major thematic areas so that when you're writing your literature review, you can do something like this where you're kind of outlining these big topic areas and citing the literature and the scholars in each of those areas.
and also keep track of authors. When you start seeing authors being cited repeatedly, those are the ones you may want to look at more closely. So
It's always a good tip off that they're probably a major scholar in the field.
yeah, so.
Yeah. Great. So again, just to go back to the question, if anyone wants to like unmute and share, we'd love to hear from folks or put something in the chat. But I do like the analogy of literature reviews as a conversation. no worries if you don't want to speak up. But I think even just thinking of it that way, right? It's like you're in a room with different scholars, you're having conversation, or in an office hour with faculty members, and they're sharing their views, and you're kind of synthesizing them all. You're kind of taking these different points. Yeah, thank you so much, Hala. Sharing with one another through our writings. Excellent. A written conversation. Yeah, thank you so much for these chat. These are great. Questions that come up in one article might be answered in another. Great point. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes at the end of an article, you might see a scholar say, we weren't able to address this aspect. And then later on, you might find an article published where they took on that call and they actually did a whole research project based on that question, and they'll publish their work. So they build off one another. This is great.
Yes, in the humanities and the social sciences, you see much more dynamic conversation. And in STEM, it's much more linear. You have a research project that either works or fails, you write it up. People can work from that, but they're working from pretty concrete conclusions. In the humanities and the social sciences, you get much more conversation. You get much more people arguing with you. You get a lot more nuance. So be on the alert for that, because that's where you want to put yourself into that conversation on whatever topic or piece of a topic that you're working on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's just the nature of the discipline, right? In the humanities, you might be looking at a certain text, right? And there's different interpretations. So people might agree with you or disagree, things like that. All right, super. I'm going to, oh yeah, I'll turn it to Drew. Yeah.
This is the Burke. This is like, you imagine that you enter a parlor, you come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you and they are engaged in a heated discussion. You listen for a while until you decide you've caught the tenor of the argument. Then you say, you put in your order. Someone answers, you answer him. Another comes to your defense. The hour grows late, you must depart, and you do depart with the discussion still vigorously in progress. None of this happens in a vacuum. None of your work is going to be you just going, well, it might be you just going out and looking at rocks, but that's not going to be productive. So, it's all part and parcel of being part of the scholarly community. So that's what the Lit Review does. It says, this is what I think I can contribute. This is what I've looked at before. This is what others have said. Now it's my turn. So.
That's great. I like that analogy a lot. I don't know if you're a visual learner, sometimes graphic representations. These are from Derek Musgrove, who teaches history here at UMBC, these different visuals. It can be helpful to kind of, as you're reading, as you're taking notes on your readings, I don't know, to do like a visual diagram perhaps, kind of do bubbles or have a tree diagram, or trying to see what scholars are overlapping with what areas of research kind of fit together.
We have buckets too. I think it's the next one, isn't it?
Yeah, and so this is one way to think of it, kind of like a thought bubble, right? With connections and intersections. There's this way as well. You could think about different buckets, and you can group different scholars, kind of if they're agreeing on a certain position or taking a certain interpretation, you can kind of group them together. So that's another way.
This is how you do not do it. If you're in 8th grade and writing a history paper, yes, you can write a paper that says this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, the end. That is not what you want to do as a university student. So this is not how you do it. So author 1 says this, author 2 says this, author 3 says this. No, you want to be much more nuanced and synthetic than this. So
yeah.
Synthetic in the good way, not the bad way.
The fake way. Yeah, Yeah, so you definitely want to be analyzing, and you want to be, here, I'll just share this slide. You want to be grouping them in different themes, right? So you can have a theme, a subheading, and then you can talk about the different conversations around that theme. You could also think about if there's different interpretations and kind of talk about the scholars with those different interpretations, or interventions if you're doing kind of a social science intervention study. But again, you want to have analysis and you want to have an opinion, perhaps, because what you might be leading to is how scholars, you're trying to position yourself in a certain category of scholars, a different interpretation. You're trying to set yourself apart or to align yourself with a certain way of thinking or writing about a topic. So it's really important that you're analyzing, that you're giving your own opinions, you're presenting and synthesizing the work of others.
Also, how methodologies have evolved and what is current versus what was used in the past. What's considered to be valid now versus what might have been valid earlier. So yeah, you really want to be approaching this as saying, this is what is approved of now, and this is how people have been writing around it now. It's not necessarily the way that it has been done in the past. So you're providing context. So
yeah, absolutely. Drew, do you want to take this one? So
sure.
these are a little bit more detailed.
This is the first three steps of what we were talking about. Pick a working topic. Consult with your advisor. Always. I mean, with your mentors, with people who have written in the department stuff that you really enjoyed reading, and talk with them. So, and then when you're choosing the literature, we'll talk about that a little bit. You know, read deeply, read widely. Don't just sit in the articles, there's books, there's all sorts of things. Dissertations we'll talk about because they're really good for giving you outlines and bibliographies and all sorts of things. But the lit is going to be what you choose will inform what you write. So, and then you read broadly, assumptions, methodologies, take notes. We have wonderful note-taking apparatuses now for citations and stuff. So you can just keep track of what you've read and keep track of the people that they have read. So, it's research doesn't come out of nowhere. So
Yeah, and you might explore different ways of taking notes and organizing thoughts. You might want to go the post-it note method if it's useful to see everything. Some of you may have a really good note-taking system of just writing up a Google Doc after every article you read, or taking notes in the margins, or using a tool like Evernote or something that's useful. Some of you may use citation management tools like Zotero or RefWorks, or EndNote. Just there's different ways. But again, it's useful to then visualize, whether you color code or not, you should have different themes. You should start to group your findings and then see if there's any major trends and if there's theories that emerge as more reputable or more credible or more accepted by the field.
there's a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry, Drew, go ahead.
What would be the main differences between a summary and a synthesis analysis?
Oh, sorry, was that a question?
That's a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Lara. Yes, I see that now. Yeah, so
the way I would approach it is as, think of it as the difference between an abstract and an annotation. An abstract is a summary. It tells you what the article is about, doesn't say anything. It just very short summary of what the article is about, whereas an annotation is a synthesis and why you are including this in your list, your bibliography. Same thing here. You're giving a synthesis. The synthesis analysis is saying, okay, not just this article, but this article, this article, this article, and this article all point toward this. So you're not necessarily saying you're taking results or whatever and comparing it with other results and then saying how it may or may not work for you in your research. So
Yeah, that was a really good question, Laura. And I'd also say with this organized one, if you're trying to find major trends in the research, you're making a judgment call, right? If you're doing a synthesis and analysis, you're determining what theories are emerging as the most influential through your reading.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding this well. So in a synthesis and an analysis, you're kind of, well, not just including specific sources, but kind of explaining why you're including them and how it kind of like supports or counters the theory, the theoretical argument. Okay.
yeah, and you can do that for a methodology. You can do that for a theory. You can do that for any kind of things. Synthesis is always going to be more than one source because analysis, you can do a close analysis on one person's article or one person's project, but that's different than a synthesis. So
But you had it right when you kind of explained in your own words, Laura. You're exactly right. So you're kind of taking those articles and you're making an argument or your own interpretation of why you're including them in your literature review. There's a higher purpose.
Okay, thank you.
and that's a big part of this, right? That's a big part of the lit review. So
And after doing all those steps, right after you've read a lot of the literature and you've been organizing, grouping by theme, you might return to your research question and you might tweak it a little bit, right? With your advisor, you might realize that actually there's a specific gap that you actually want to kind of fill with your writing, and it can help you develop and narrow and be more specific with your thesis.
and especially if you're doing a dissertation, you do want to find the gaps because the whole purpose of doing a dissertation is adding to the world of knowledge on your topic. It has to be original research and it has to be original. So master's theses can be a little bit less developed than that, but for the most part, you are trying to find something new to present. So, and sometimes that can be really, really narrow, but.
And we've covered this before, but this is where it can be helpful to then identify headings and subheadings, even thinking about the example we looked at where you have different categories of your literature review, different sections of your literature review. If you're writing a longer article or a dissertation. Yeah. As you're writing, this kind of goes to the question Laura had. You're really focused on analysis. You're really comparing and evaluating and giving your judgment on the arguments that are being made. All right. Yeah, any other questions there about like the process? We've kind of talked about the process of writing one, different ideas. What we can do now is give some examples and some tools that you can use to find the literature and to see examples of other resources.
I don't know if I can click on that, can I?
I can. Drew.
Okay. Oxford, for those of you who are not in my age group, you probably don't have much experience with bibliographies, except like at the end of books and whatever. Bibliographies used to be produced really often on topics, and they were often the major reference resource in a discipline. Oxford has started bringing out these Oxford bibliographies online, and we have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have like dozen of them. No, not even 8. But what they do is, would you click on the one for social work? That's fine. And what they do is for each individual topic in the bibliography, so if you click on adolescent depression, I don't care, you'll see that what they do is there's an intro, and then they list different types of works that you can look at for, so reference works, and this, then the journal articles, but these are the major journals that you're going to be reading in, if you're, according to this person at least. And these are all journals, not journal articles, but journals that cover your topic. And then in diagnosis and assessment, they have different, all of these things. So then they have, if you go down epidemiology and prevalence, see on in this article on the left, they have all of this stuff listed out. So if you're working on adolescent depression, here's a collection of material you can start with, written by someone hired specifically to write this up. So this is like peer review. This is like somebody with knowledge creating this bibliography. So, and then all of these, if you scroll down, you can see that there's citations, there's all sorts of things in here that you can link out to books and whatever, and they're really good. If you find one on your topic, that's the other thing. And then in each one of these articles, they'll list out all of these different resources. So it's a great place to start. So
It looks like, Hallie, you have a question about citing the bibliography. What you would do is you would cite the particular topic. So this is like an encyclopedia in a sense, right? It has all these different topics in the umbrella of social work. So if you're looking at a specific topic within there, you would cite this bibliography. Make sure you'd cite this kind of like as a chapter. You'd cite rehabilitation and these authors that wrote it within the Oxford Bibliography of Social Work.
And if you look up there above the little blue box on the right-hand side, you will see that Oxford gives you basic citation styles. So there it is, and you can do it, and then you can choose from, it's a drop-down. If you don't like APA, and if you like Chicago or MLA, you can do it from there, and then you can export it. So you can also email these to yourself. All of our databases these days allow for emailing citations, and most of them allow for emailing attached full text if it's available. So use the tools. You have massive amounts of information available. That can be a problem sometimes. Just narrowing down, winnowing out what you want to read and getting it, because there's a lot out there now. So,
and we will share the slides out after the session, so you'll have these links as well.
and honestly, if you go to the library homepage, click on databases and put in Oxford bibliographies, it'll pop up. So
Yeah, I can show that. And in fact, we should do just a regular search as well. So I'm going to go to the library homepage. And so you can always put in Oxford bibliography under database, and that will come up that way. But then just know, as you're looking in just the combined search, the article search is going to have most of our databases. So if you want to just try an interdisciplinary combined search from most of what we have, you can put your topic in here. Right, and you can do a search. I would definitely recommend narrowing it and focusing it, right? Because you're going to have 3 million.
Right. There is an advanced search that you can do a little bit more nuanced things than just Google.
Yeah, so the advanced search is underneath. You can click on the advanced search. You can do a specific population, elder care, whatever you're really looking at, right? I recommend doing advanced.
And you can change those. You can change those field settings to subject terms, author. So
if you want the search to show up in the title, you can do that. If you want it to show up in the subject terms or the abstract, that tends to be the one I use. I use abstracts quite a bit to search. So just depending on what you want to do.
the nice thing about the article search, is that it's the closest thing that you're going to find to a Google Scholar search in the material you're paying for.
Yeah.
These are all subscribed things. So you're going to get full text, and hopefully you will all have your Interlibrary Loan accounts set up. If not, do so, because that will get you anything that we don't have. Especially in the journal literature, ILL can get pretty much anything that you can find. So
just to follow up with that, if you're not sure what Interlibrary Loan is, if you ever see a little icon like that, you can click in there and it will link to your account. You'll be able to put in it's pulling the article title directly from what I need, and then I click submit. Now I've already set up my account. If you need to set up an account, you can go to using the library, my accounts, and click on Interlibrary Loan account.
right.
So.
And the only problem with that people sometimes run into is that if you look at your gold card,
Your ID card.
your ID card, gold card, red card, whatever it is, on the right-hand side above the barcode itself is your 13-digit library ID number. That's the one they're asking for. And then it's like magic. Once your account's set up, if you click on that request through Interlibrary Loan, the only thing that you have to put in there is the date not wanted after. So use end of the year or use end of the month or whatever. This will get you articles usually within 24 hours. So don't be shy about using it. There's human beings back in the ILL office. It's not all automatic and it's not all robots. If they can't find something, they'll let you know. But this opens up the literature to pretty much anything. And the other thing is, if you find something out on the web that you really like, it's an article or a book, throw it into our searches, because if we do not have it, we can probably get it for you. Now, as with everything these days, we buy primarily in English. The books we buy are primarily English. The databases we buy primarily have English language, but you can select. Do that search again in articles, Aaron?
Yeah.
Or any search.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Trying to spell like me.
There we go.
And this is one of the functions of all of the EBSCO databases. If you go over on the left and scroll down, you have your limiters, and one of them is language. So you can see articles in other languages. Of course, most of them are going to be in English, but some will be in. It's getting better. It's not necessarily great yet, but then we don't buy all of the databases that are out there. So, I mean, the potential for finding literature in other languages is there. It's just not all that easy. So.
Yeah, and also just a couple other tools while we're here. You can limit in a number of ways using the left-hand limiters. You can limit by peer-reviewed articles. You can limit by publication date. So there are many ways you can start to limit your search. You can add keywords using the advanced search. And then it's also helpful to see what other subject terms are being pulled up. So you can click on the subject. These are some other terms that are coming up. You can click on that to just search those subject terms.
Oh, and since we're here, Aaron, you may as well show them how to email.
Yeah, and so if you have found some different articles that you like, you can click into an article, and then here you have kind of the metadata, you have the article title, the authors, the subject terms here. It gives you other subject terms that you can then click into and find other articles on that subject. So that's a useful tool. And the full text is usually in the left-hand column. There's a PDF or a linked full text or a link to Interlibrary Loan. And then over on the right, there is the toolbar where you can save the article. So I always recommend using one of these tools. You can download it, you can email it to yourself and specify the citation you want it to come in. You can also cite it by clicking on the cite option and identifying, say you're doing APA, it's helpful to see the citation right away. You can use that. I always check over it because it's only as good as the computer algorithm that pulled the citation together. So still check over it, but it's a good start.
And
And the
normally,
permalink is
normally
useful as well.
what you'd see over on the right when you hit that email button, if there's linked full text, it should be putting in the linked full text for you, but in this case, it's not. So just go over to the left and download the article yourself. So, see, normally, go to another one that has full text. Something's going on with these. Do number 2, yeah. And do email. It should be. Yeah, there. See where it says include when sending HTML and PDF. That's what those will automatically be default chosen for you. So when you're sending a citation, you'll also get the full text. So
that's kind of just a very quick overview of some of the tools for searching in the article search. Know that if you're doing a search back on the library homepage, if you're looking for books or ebooks specifically, I would do the search using the books tab. If an ebook comes up, it will label it as an ebook and you'll be able to read online. So click on the online access. And if it's a print book, you'll see the record with the call number. You can go to the library and ask for help if you need to know where to find it, and you can check it out.
Or you can request it for pickup. So we're still doing curbside pickup. So.
And then finally, if you are interested in learning what are some of the big databases for your field of study, click on Research Help and Subject Guides. And we have a subject guide for all of the majors and departments at UMBC. So you can click on your subject area, and here are the major databases for your area. So you can click into it and do a literature review just in that specific database if you want to. Otherwise, you can use the mega search on the library homepage.
And one of the powerful ways to see what literature is available to you is using that article search on the library homepage and just seeing the number of results you get. So if you get 19,000, you know that you've got literature to read. If you get 4, you may want to change your keywords or your topic, because remember, what we're looking at is the published literature, which takes time to produce. So if you are thinking about doing a topic that only popped up last week in the news or whatever, look to see whether anybody else has researched that or something similar, because if they haven't, you're not going to have any literature to read. So it's important. So, but that article tab will give you, that article search will give you a fair idea of what's out there. So.
Yeah, so that was just a very brief overview to Interlibrary Loan and article search and the book search. So feel free to explore. That's probably the best way, is just dive in and try it out.
And honestly, if you don't remember anything else from this except setting up your Interlibrary Loan account, you'll still come out ahead. So.
We'll leave our emails after the session too, so you can always ask us questions. And then there's a chat that's on from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can just click into the chat and ask a question as well. So if you ever have trouble, feel free to use the chat.
Or if you come across if you come across a resource that you think we should have access to, or it says we should have access to, and the links are broken, let us know. Those things are easy to fix. So, but we need to know about them. So we're here. I mean,
Thanks, Jasmine. We should have introduced you, but Jasmine Shoemakers are another reference and instruction librarian colleague, and I love
yes.
her chat. We are not robots. We're actually on the other end answering chat. So we're helping out. There's real humans there. All right. We've given some examples. I'll just do a couple. We're wrapping up on time. We'll probably just be another 5 minutes. So if you have to go, we understand. If you want to stay, there's just a few other resources to go over. ProQuest is your dissertation database. So that's if you are interested in looking at other dissertations and theses.
And when you go back go back to the database list for a quick. Another important thing is there's a special cutout for dissertations and theses at UMBC. So if you want to see what others in your department have written, either with the person who's your advisor or with others, how they have constructed their lit reviews or whatever, this is a very good way to see what the department expects or what the department likes to see. So.
And again, it's just UMBC. So you're
Right.
going to have a slightly narrower set, right? It's not the whole world. So just know that, but it is a useful way to see what other students have written here at UMBC for their degree programs.
Yeah, and it's also, if you're working with a particular advisor, you can you can choose by advisor. So you can see what. Because
you can also look up by subject and department. So that's also useful. It's more like keyword subjects, but.
Yep. It's a very useful tool because different departments have different standards. Different departments like to approach their publications different ways. So, it's good to look at what others have done before you. So. And the NDTLD theses is international. So European, Asian, this is going to be global. So. Web of Science. The science STEM people are much more familiar with this than the humanities and social science people are, only because it works much better for STEM people than for us. What Web of Science does is it tracks citations. It's a citation, it tracks works by numbers of citations. So if you put that same search you did in, Aaron.
Sure, should I do the rehabilitation one?
Yeah, why not? And this is a really good way, depending on the topic, to identify what sometimes are called seminal works, major works, whatever. See over on the right where it says 15 citations, 50 references. This is what it does for each article. So for number 1, 15 other authors have cited this article. This article has used 50 references in its creation, and you can see all of those. Now you can see, you can see right there where it says in results, you can get all of these, you get the article, you get the whatever, and then you can see who else has cited that. Go back up to the top and go back to results. And you can see on the gray bar where it says relevance, the little in tiny little print there, you can sort by citations highest first. So if you do that, these are the articles that have been really widely cited. And those are the ones you may want to look at. Well, not that first one, because that's a systematic analysis. the burden of disease, but it's okay. These are the big articles. So, and you can see over on the left, quick filters, highly cited papers, hot papers. So it's a nice tool for the hard sciences. It does a much larger journal set than it does for the social sciences and humanities, but it's still really useful. So, but again, it does everything from citations. So,
And we know we're coming up on the time, so we will send out these slides. Don't worry. We will send them out to you, and we'll also share the recording out if you missed anything. So Web of Science is an excellent tool. Just know that there are resources. We talked about the article search. We talked about the book searching, using the subject databases, using dissertation searches, using Web of Science. So you can always feel free to go back in the recording and review. You can absolutely reach out and contact us via email. If you need help and you're in the library, come down to the first floor, go to the checkout desk and say you need some reference help or research help, and we're happy to come out and work with you one-on-one. And you can also do a virtual appointment as well.
virtual
There's always the
appointments are
library chat.
easy to, yeah, virtual appointments are easy to set up, and they are also, I mean, we could do them. They're convenient. So.
So if you make a research appointment, you can see the different departments and areas of study. You can see our names. So Drew, we have here, I'm further down, English. You can schedule an appointment and just click on your time, continue, or email us if none of the times work, and just let us know. Yeah, and we'll be around the next 5 minutes or so to answer any specific questions if you have
Yeah, I
them.
have a consult at 1 o'clock. So
Okay, so Drew's going to be
I'm
doing a
going to
virtual
be
appointment
doing
at
it
1.
at 59. So, but yeah, and the other thing to remember is ask your advisor what should I be reading? What ask for pointers. Ask for what they read when they were doing their research. You know what they found helpful. These are people who've been through the process, so they know where the pitfalls are. So,
Yeah, and thanks for all who have said thank you. Thanks so much, everyone who is here.
oh yeah, and let's not forget that the graduate school also has all sorts of resources for writing support and
Oh, that's right.
dissertation
Absolutely.
support, and so that's a whole nother universe of resources that you can reach out to for help. So.
Yeah, and if you're working on a literature review, don't get discouraged. There can be times that can feel a little bit overwhelming, but you'll make it through. You can always reach out for support as well. We're happy to help. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording.